We have some BioWare and Mass Effect, I guess, in relation news this week. So I want to talk about it. It involves rumors and weirdo right winger grifters and mediocre journalists and stuff like that, as well as people leaving BioWare. So let's jump into it. Let's kind of explore it all, and I'll kind of give my thoughts as we go. Okay, so where this kicked off was not actually Jeff Grubb, but he's the only one I'm going to give credit to because it seems to annoy the people who kind of broke this. Long story short, Smash JT, who is this really despicable, awful right wing grifter creator in the games kind of circle. He's part of the group of like Grums and a bunch of these losers who spend their entire day in life thinking about how oppressed they are and how woke and how full of DEI everything is, even though they don't really understand what any of those things mean. And who only exist to spread toxicity and bad vibes and lies, as we will experience here. So that individual put out a leak that Corinne Bush was leaving BioWare. She was the creative director, the director of Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and in that BioWare Edmonton is shutting down, and that's the main BioWare studio. I believe it's Edmonton and Austin at this point. They used to have a third studio, but that's now called EA Motive. That's who I believe made Andromeda. I can't remember exactly, but they got split off. Their EA Motive, and they're actually working on the Iron Man game now, where ironically a bunch of BioWare people are currently helping until they can start production on Mass Effect. So this rumor comes out. From what I've gathered, this right wing grifter loser found other people showing screenshots of an email that Corinne sent out to everyone saying that she was leaving at BioWare, and then took that, and that's what these guys do. So if you're ever wondering why these people gain a little traction sometimes, it's because they'll take a real story and then they'll tack on their own made up stuff. So in this case, the story was that Corinne was leaving BioWare after being at EA for 18 years. We'll talk about her career there in a minute. And then they tacked on, well, that, and also Edmonton is closing, which there's no indication of that. Now, the first, somewhat reputable comment on this came from Jeff Grubb, who said Corinne Bush, director of Dragon Age, is leaving, really is leaving BioWare. But I don't think EA is closing BioWare Edmonton. Was told there is nothing solid about that part of the rumor. Then he goes on to be passive aggressive. All these right wing grifters got mad that he did this and didn't credit Smash JT, even though the part of the story that is true, Smash JT didn't break, and the part of the story that Smash JT made up isn't credible. So why would you credit them for anything? This frustrated me as well, though, because Jeff Grubb, in my opinion, is still platforming these people, especially by mentioning the BioWare Edmonton thing, even though he's also saying it's not true. And, at least is tacitly, giving engagement to that person and to those people, which is a net negative. That's a bad thing. And then being silly about it in the replies, it's a greater problem, I think, with the way he does things, but that's, who am I to judge? He's the one who is known in the industry and I'm not. So moving on to the actual story, that Corinne is leaving, this happens, especially with people who have been at one company for a long time. Corinne did, after this, put out her own statement saying, well, I suppose you've heard, yes, I've made the decision to leave BioWare. I want to encourage everyone not to read too much into this. It was my decision so I could continue making the kind of RPGs you/we enjoy. Thank you for the outpouring of love and support. You mean the world to me. And then she does, in the replies here, say, thank you for entrusting me with our dear Dragon Age. It was an honor to be a steward for the franchise and to play a part in ensuring its continuance. Biggest shout outs to the wonderful, this is John Epler, I believe, without whom I don't think I would have had the fortitude. And that she says, I'm so excited to see what BioWare does with Mass Effect and trust that I'll be rooting for them the whole while. What she's referencing here is a Eurogamer article as well, where in there they asked her about her leaving, and she responded, and basically the idea was, I got an offer that I just couldn't refuse. We'll see where she ends up, and that's why she's leaving. I have spoken to her briefly privately. Our conversation doesn't matter for this video, because I didn't bring any of this stuff up. My own speculation on this is that she was the director, the lead director on, or one of the top leadership on Dragon Age, and now they're moving over to Mass Effect, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But her position's filled. So she couldn't just go from what she was doing on Dragon Age to Mass Effect, because that's, Mike Gamble, or, they probably have a different structure to a point. And so she likely would have been expected to take a more junior position. No one wants to do that when they are fairly established in their industry and have the experience. And so I assume if she was offered a position similar to her own with another company, and it's, she took it. It's nice to try something new as well, especially after even what I've heard from other people who worked on this game, is that it was a tough development run, especially at the end. It was a lot of work, and it doesn't surprise me that we've seen other people leave and all that. So for Corinne, I misinterpreted a lot of these stories that she had been at BioWare for 18 years. If you look at her, her Moby Games page here, she actually spent the majority of her career working on The Sims 3, which is another gigantic franchise. And actually her earliest career was doing a bunch of environmental stuff and other work, like frontline dev work on the Tiger Woods series back in the day. So, not that that changes anything, but it does make it, it's not like she was at BioWare for 18 years. She isn't one of their like old devs that worked on the trilogy. She's someone who is fairly new to BioWare, gave her effort into this game, and then it was really hard, and she was on it forever, and now she's going to try something else. So I wish the best for her, and I'm excited to see what BioWare does as a fellow fan now. Shortly after this, we also got this post here from Blair Thorburn, who I believe is one of the more junior people on the Dragon Age project, essentially saying the same thing here. So they said, the time has come with the project winding down. I'm looking for new opportunities. If any mutuals know a need for a design leader or principal with 16 years of experience, please DM me. Gameplay and systems are my main areas of focus, but I have broad generalist coverage. Another person who was on the project, and if you read and check out their resume, they weren't at BioWare that long, and they also probably didn't have necessarily the same role over on Mass Effect. And like if you look at their movie page, they worked on Veilguard, and then it looks like they've kind of bounced around to different studios before then, which isn't a bad thing. That's really cool. Look at some of these games and how awesome it would be to know that you were a part of making those games. Now, what I will say is the person who I've kind of been keeping my eye on is John Epler, who Corinne mentioned in her goodbye social media post. He has experience as QA in the trilogy, I believe specifically Mass Effect 2, and then also was a finalist for Mass Effect Andromeda. I won't pretend like I know how BioWare labels their jobs. My assumption is that he was probably just kind of like a generalist who helped ship Andromeda. Now, whatever your feelings are about Andromeda, that is what it is, including my own. But it seems like Epler has more of a connection to Mass Effect, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's there and finds a role in the Mass Effect game that's coming. Speaking to that, and going back to my previous, what I was talking about before, is that because Dragon Age, the Veilguard, is not getting DLC, they're not doing expansions, even before it came out, they really had a big message of like, we want this to be a complete game. And it is. I've beaten it once, I've started another playthrough. It is a full game, where if you go back to Dragon Age Inquisition, that was a game that literally they had a DLC that finished the game. Now, in theory, the game was self-contained, but the I believe it was the Trespasser DLC finished the story, and that leads to the Veilguard. And it seems like they really didn't want to do that again, and that's not what they're doing. And so when that happens, there's a few things that happen. After a big development project, it's not uncommon for people to leave, especially leadership, to begin their own studios or to join other studios to bring that experience to them. Um, this sounds like it was a tumultuous development, and not because anyone did anything wrong or because people were getting overly worked or anything like that. It was just a hard game to ship. Everyone, all the stories are like, oh, they've been working on Veilguard for 8 years. Well, not really. If you look into it and you read some of the stories that have come out, especially recently, basically they were making a different game that got scuttled, and then they made the Veilguard, and it had what seems to be a fairly typical 3 or 4 year development period, where all the work before that was pre-production or the scrapped work on essentially a different game. I'm sure there's scraps of it in the Veilguard, but for the most part, it was a new development, and that's why it took so long. Then it comes to Mass Effect as well. A few years ago, BioWare was a studio that had essentially 3 teams. One team working on the Star Wars MMO, one team working primarily, probably the largest team, working on Dragon Age, which at the point was Dreadwolf, is now the Veilguard, to get that out. And then there was a third team working on Mass Effect pre-production for the next Mass Effect game. That was probably bigger than people think, but that team sounds like it got shrunk down, or at least borrowed, by the Veilguard team so they could ship their game. With a, I assume, extremely small number, if anyone, left to work on the Mass Effect pre-production for the last year or so, it seems. That's not the case anymore. They don't have the Star Wars team anymore. That game was sold off to a different publisher and is being kept up by them. Dragon Age of Veilguard is out, and they're not expecting any more play or any more content for it. And I would assume even the patches and stuff are probably basically done. The game ran well out the box. They did put out some patches, and I believe they did some fixes and bug fixing and stuff. But for the most part, that game is pretty much a complete package now. And the next step is Mass Effect. I would say even in Corinne's post about leaving, it was kind of cool to see someone other than Mike Gamble say Mass Effect. I think it shouldn't be that surprising for us to all acknowledge that that's what they're working on now. It's not going to probably take, there's going to be a lot of people who don't come over, either by choice or because they won't have a role. Hopefully that doesn't lead to layoffs. It makes me happy to see that some of the devs, either by their own choice or being told to, have had opportunities to work over at EA Motive on Iron Man. I even saw one dev talking about a BioWare dev working on the new Battlefield game over at DICE, and I think doing story stuff with that, which is exciting because that means it's going to have a story again. And this isn't a bad thing. It's fairly natural. I'm going to have to see some other pretty different kinds of news to start worrying about it. The final thing I'll say is that even with these departures, the BioWare hiring page still doesn't have anything on it. They haven't had any post on here for Mass Effect in a while. I'd say it's been a year and a half maybe. There was a run a few years ago where they had like 6 different director positions, and those have all been filled, and we know who they are. And for all we know, as far as I can tell, they're all still there, which is really exciting for me because that means that they're between Mike Gamble and all the directors under him on the Mass Effect project, even through them being borrowed by the Veilguard, they've had this core team of their like 6 or so directors who have all been there now for multiple years. I believe the newest one, or the one who wasn't with BioWare before, was Mary DeMarley, their narrative director, and she's even been there now for 2 or 3 years. That's good. That's stability. That's a good core team that's been there for just Mass Effect for a while. And that makes me happy. Now, if we see them start to fall off, then there may be something to worry about. But that'll be a different video that hopefully I never have to make. So I've rambled on a lot. I've said a lot of things. At the end of the day, my summary, I guess, is that it sucks to see people leave. You hate to do that. It's nice to see familiar faces. But what's happening shouldn't be that surprising. And there's going to have to be other things that happen for me to start, setting off the alarm and being worried about BioWare or the next Mass Effect or whatever. This is fairly typical attrition for game dev studios. And if you look at these people's specific situations, it becomes less and less surprising they're doing this, simply because, even as someone who's worked at my job for over a decade, I don't plan on leaving because I'm comfortable and I like what I do and it allows me to do the other things I want. But if things change there, or maybe I just get antsy, or maybe I want to go make more money somewhere else, I could leave this job without there being anything wrong with my job. And so when I see these people doing the same thing, I see kind of, kindred spirits to a point where I can understand why they're doing what they're doing and how it could mean absolutely nothing for the company that they're leaving, that this just happens. And kind of the last point I'll make is that this kind of falls into sometimes, and I've already seen it pop up a little bit, of the ship of Theseus that BioWare is. And it gets brought up in my comments all the time. I'm sure someone who doesn't make it this far in the video is going to say it in the comments, but it's okay for people to leave studios because they get replaced, and you bring in new blood, you bring in younger people. A big thing I've said is that it seems like people think that if the BioWare staff that made the trilogy isn't all still at BioWare and the only ones working on the next game, then it can't be good. And that's just unrealistic. That the Mass Effect 3 was released over 10 years ago. The Mass Effect 1 was released like 15 years ago. And that's just not how the industry works. Those people have gone off and started their own studios and closed some of those studios. And some of them have left and come back and left again. Wink, wink. And they've also brought in new people. Like, there's all this talk of, one, there's still a lot of vets there. Most of the leadership on this game, besides Mary DeMarley, have been at BioWare for quite a while. But then also the new people, the people who have been there for 2 or 3 years, or who they've recently hired, are all people who grew up playing Mass Effect. So, we'll have to see how that plays out. But at the very least, it's great to have a bunch of the OG devs working on it and writers and stuff. But maybe the second best thing is to have people who have played these games their entire adult life, or even as teenagers, and who love these franchises and who love Mass Effect, who love the characters, who love the world. That's not a bad thing. And then they bring, a more modern idea. They bring new ideas to the idea, the game and the franchise and all that. And they collaborate with the veterans, and, all their ideas together can make a modern Mass Effect game that's really good, that still respects the trilogy and the old fans, but also brings in new fans and brings the game up to a modern spec. I think all of those things can work together. And personally, I'm very excited for it. So that is where I'll stop rambling. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments of the video. Be nice. If you're not, you'll never be seen again. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up so other people see it. And consider subscribing to the channel. I cover Mass Effect as often as I can think of a video for it. I cover lots of other games and hardware and all of that as well. I even have some podcasts and some other projects also that all show up here. So subscribe to the channel. And if you really, really want to support what I do, consider becoming a YouTube member. You get videos like this a couple days early, and you get some other perks as well. You get like a special role in my Discord and things like that, where you can continue the conversation as well. If you want to check out my other content, if you want to see the other ways you can support me, check out the links in the description of the video. That is all I have for this one. So until next time.